All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and we're back with another episode of the MMA Conspiracy Hour. I'm here with Mike Davis and Miguel Adarati of the Lights Out podcast, the best MMA history podcast, hands down. And today we're going to discuss failure to disclose. TJ Dillashaw, Derek Minner, Amir Latifi all failed to disclose certain things going into fights, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to let Miguel start this time.
Yeah, you got TJ Dillashaw coming out, and it always comes back to, it sounds like an excuse, right? It's like, yeah, I popped my shoulder out a few times in practice, that's why I lost the fight. So that may be where it comes from in the post-fight speeches and stuff. But it's very revealing, and he's the biggest case, Derek Minner may have walked into a fight he didn't intend to win, depending on what, whose side you believe in a story about betting. And Latifi had staph infection that he didn't disclose, which I don't know if he can give it to his opponent or, you run, there's a lot of risks with this type of stuff going on. And, technically, you might be in breach of your contract with the UFC for going in there like that, not 100% prepared, in which case you'd be open to fraud charges. Now, that might be extreme, but if the lawyer, I know that the paychecks for the UFC lawyers are extreme. So if they had a matching strategy, that could be, part of the way they attack these guys. And I do think Latifi got a 3-month suspension. Staph, Mike is, I'm going to bounce it to Mike because, staph means he would have canceled his fight, maybe moved it out another 6 months. And what does that happen? Each fighter's got to deal with that on a financial bet. Mike?
All right, so there's 3 different situations here. Obviously, TJ Dillashaw the shoulder, Minard the foot, and James Krause. That's kind of like the big tagline, and Latifi being sick. On the surface level, the simpletons would say, "Oh, it's just 3 different situations." And that James Krause gambling situation, wow, that's just incredible. Though that's not the headline that you be reading here. What this amazing MMA journalist that we're all subject to, what they should reporting is one thing. None of these fighters probably have insurance. Now, I'm saying probably because I don't know these 3, but the belief, I shouldn't say none here. Let me rephrase this. The likelihood of all 3 of them having insurance is probably pretty low, especially if you're on a minimum pay scale like Minard. So now Minard's coming into his fight. He's got a bum foot, and he needs surgery on it. So now he discloses it to the UFC. Hey, I got foot problems. I heard it in training. Who pays for his surgery? His employer doesn't. So now he's stuck having to pay for his own surgery, and he doesn't have insurance. So now here's his other option. Save up money, go back to work, stop training, pay for your surgery, and then go back to the UFC, or take a loss in the UFC, have their insurance cover your injury, and, regroup, hope you don't get cut, and move forward. That's Minard's situation. Now, you can sit here and say, well, James Krause, what he may or may not have known, that has nothing to do with anything. The fact is, you've got a guy that's subject to USADA testing, completely different topic within itself, having to report everywhere he goes, doesn't have insurance through the company because he's an independent contractor. And now they're going to sit here and go, well, there was a swing on the bets and the numbers. Well, all of his friends and family knew about it. I mean, his training partners as well. Latifi, here, you know what? You're going to miss out on another payday. That payday that you missed in Columbus when your fight got canceled day of? I know we gave you your show money, but these people, they can't afford to miss too many fights because they're living check to check. Dillashaw just took a couple of years off. Do you think he can take another year off and pay for his surgery? He went in there having the UFC pay for his surgery and dropped a title fight. He pretty much said, I couldn't wait another year. It comes down to pay scale and money. It's not gambling sensation, guy going in there, risking his health even more because he was hurt, or Minard maybe throwing money against himself and going out in the first round. No, it's about guys not being able to pay their bills. If you listen to our Gray Maynard interview on the Lights Out podcast, the reoccurring theme is him taking fights he shouldn't have taken because he wasn't making enough money, but he had to pay the bills. All three of those people are in that same category. And it's more of a black guy on the UFC, in my opinion, than it is on the sport and the actions of the people that were involved in it.
Yeah, Maynard's a real black eye on them because if I remember the main story that he said is he's heading into one of the Edgar fights, not the first one. So like he's
Second
already
one.
fought for a world title. He's heading into this big fight, but recovering off the last fight, he got 50% of his pay because he took a loss or however it worked. He didn't have the money, so he was dabbling in real estate, and he had a house purchased, but he was counting on some of the money coming in to finish the deal. I don't remember the complications of it, but you see how he's working a second job and on top of the UFC. That is a circumstance that's almost impossible to handle or almost impossible to deal with unless they're actually going to come in and go, oh, here's a couple $100,000 in the bank for you. Take it easy on that side job and go ahead and work on the fighting. So that's the most difficult of all situations, especially when you consider how hardworking Gray Maynard was. He was going into a title fight, and he's not making enough that he has to make other side deals. Kind of sad. With the injured guys, this is a point I always come back to. You're in a conflict situation here between the UFC and the fighters. Many times the fighter might even call them up and softly softly start the conversation. Oh, I sprained my ankle in training. Hey, if the matchmaker's response to that is, you do this fight or you'll sit for a year.
Yep.
Which, we've heard quotes of that nature from them. They push people into fights.
And Jamie Varner, our last interview, Jamie Varner, that airs on Monday, said that.
If that happens, repeatedly, that's a real problem too, because then there's no atmosphere for them to go ahead and call them. So I think that the UFC, and because the contract is between the UFC and the fighters, they're adversarial in this, and they're not, but you're leaving it for them to police themselves. This is an excellent spot for the commission doctors to actually do what doctors do, is examine the fighters to the point where something like Dillashaw's shoulder should come up in an examination, like a real, vigorous physical examination, like they're going to go into a vigorous contest. So do more than just check off paperwork and, listen to their vitals. And that's what they do now, but somebody could have noticed that the shoulder was not operating the way, ask him to do this, I mean, he wouldn't be able to do that if it's been separated 20 times in the last month. You would notice a little bit of a lag, a little bit of something. A doctor doing their job, the commission doing their job of approving this stuff, but the commissions are just there to kowtow to the money and the promoters and grab their fees and suspend enough fighters that they can say we're doing our job, but actual work of this nature, they don't do that. And so I think the solution is have the commissions and the commission doctors have a real doctor-patient relationship with the fighter, not fill out paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, even through Zoom, even if it means through Zoom and conversations. Yeah.
And in addition to that, if the fighter were still to navigate through this and go into a fight and then, slip up in the interview and go, yeah, I tore my ACL bike riding 6 weeks ago. And, the UFC may still not want to pay for their surgery, and the circumstances could still happen. It could still be there. But if the doctors were really involved in an examination and the fighter fooled the doctor as well, then that's even a stronger case for fraud and to police this type of way. So because now to fool the commission now is really not very difficult. I'm sure millions of every fighter has thought about it, or and many have gotten away with it. And we know the UFC doesn't really care. They want to push the fight through. So just the whole atmosphere needs to change, and the doctors are front line to me.
We did see a suspension with Latifi, though, and I don't recall seeing that in other cases. Do you think we see that more?
I think the Latifi suspension is preparation for what Dillashaw is going to get because I think
Dillashaw.
I think Dillashaw is going to be the test case. And again, the reason for this is, and we mentioned in another podcast, is something else. People should get used to putting out in public. We're talking about the UFC and how publicly they'll even admit, oh, how many Twitter followers and Instagram followers the fighters have is very important for how we push them. The number that they don't tell you behind the scenes that is much more important that they look at is the amount of action that comes in at the books for each fighter. When that comes, and Dillashaw will have moved the needle. It's a title fight. It's against a big name as well. That fight moves the needle. Now they've got gamblers that they have to explain to. What if somebody put $1 million on Dillashaw? That's a personal phone call to Dana. Dana probably knows those guys. He calls him up and goes, man, I put $1 million on him. I thought we were going to have a fight. And then here's the kid in the post-fight interview saying he wouldn't even, he separated his shoulder 20 times. How can you let him fight? So when Dana's maybe deal with customers of those guys like that, you don't even see that.
All right. Can I counter? Would you let me to counter? Okay. You had mentioned what Dillashaw's got coming. All right. That's what you said. Initially, I agreed with that. Now I don't. And the reason is because Dillashaw told the referee. Dillashaw told the referee in the pre-fight meeting before he went out there. So technically, now if I'm, the manager, coach, I'm the Matt Hume of that organization, I'm going, no, we did disclose it. You didn't do your job. The referee never kicked it up. Not our fault. We let we were going to keep it secret. We had a call to arms. We had, we just thought maybe we should do the right thing. He's scot-free.
No, I don't think so because, again, if you trace it, I think we're both right. I think you're absolutely right that maybe even Dillashaw is going to say that'll be his defense. I told the ref. But
it's a good one.
The ref is an employee of the commission. He's not an employee of the UFC. So he's with the commission. And again, so he should bounce it to the doctors. Hey, examine this guy or examine this guy again. So the failure is strictly with the commission. Okay. The UFC is not a problem here.
Let me ask you the second part of my question. So, my defense, Todd, the criminal mind that you have to have in order to kind of get out of the situations that you intentionally put yourself in. He says, no, I disclosed it to the commission. Now let's just pretend you're the UFC. And you got a referee that goes, the main event just disclosed to me that his shoulder separated. A doctor needs to go look at him. And an hour and a half before the event, they scratch it because he failed his physical. Because the doctors checked it. What kind of doghouse do you think that referee would be in?
Yeah, that's a problem, is the accountability of those people. He's hard. We can't get fights by him. All that stuff comes into play. The commission still should be a completely neutral body that doesn't say, well, this fight, there's precedent for this in boxing, only at one of the biggest fights of all time, which was Mayweather-Pacquiao. Pacquiao, after the fight, when he didn't look as great and took a loss, said, hey, I went in there with an injury. And a lot of people freaked out. And
furious.
And I can't believe, I don't care what number Dillashaw pulls or whatever that title fight pulls, it ain't approaching Pacquiao and Mayweather money. So, at the end of the day, I don't know how these things get solved. With some of that big time gambling stuff, it's behind the scenes. Maybe they're going to have to return bets. At the end, if houses have to return bets, those are the kinds of things that become a little bit of a black eye, I think. So I don't know how that all works out. But if Dillashaw is the cause of that and the cause of enough stress, that could be where it's coming from, is from the gamblers. If you bet any money on Dillashaw, you have to be pissed.
Todd?
All right, this is Todd Atkins, and again, I'm signing off with Mike Davis and Miguel Adarati from the Lights Out podcast. Check it out on YouTube and Spotify. And until the next time, take care.